Hello and welcome to the lecture on borders, plus the shapes of states and major boundary disputes. My name is Leon Sultan. I'm an AP Human Geography teacher at Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco, California. So we're going to start with how states establish boundaries. This is really 4 steps, how states establish boundaries. Number 1, they define the boundaries. So between 2 states, they have to have a treaty, they have a meeting, they create a legal document, and they define exactly where those boundaries are. They delimit those boundaries, so then they have their cartographers, they work with maps, and they draw the boundaries on the map. Then they go on to the land and they demarcate. Demarcation on the land are physical barriers on the ground. So the physical barrier could be something as big as a fence, or it could be something as small as just a small marker that exists along the ground. Finally, they administrate. So to administrate a boundary is to put people on the ground and enforce or regulate movement across the boundary. Let's take a look at some boundaries between different states that are being administrated currently present day. So here's an example of a boundary. We see a picture here. It says Feliz Viaje, and this is a boundary that is administrated between Colombia and Venezuela. So this is a boundary that there's no disputes over in terms of where it is, the definition, the delimitation, the demarcation, and the administration of. There are no disputes about this boundary currently. Next boundary here is pictured as between India and Nepal. Again, this is a boundary essentially without dispute, and we can see people, it's demarcated with basically these nice entryways, right, with signs painted on them. So you know when you're crossing over the border, and there are authorities there to check your passport, etc., stamp your passport, check your visa, and make sure that you're entering the country legally, etc., etc. Here's a picture of the U.S.-Mexico boundary, and again, this is there's a pretty large demarcation of this boundary, much of which is a fence, and if the promise of the most recent election comes to fruition, we will see a fence across or a wall across the entire boundary, but currently we don't have that. We do have a fence and small walls in certain places on this boundary, but here we can see that people do cross this boundary. Actually, thousands of people cross this boundary on a daily basis, and this boundary is administrated on both sides by U.S. and Mexican authorities. So the 4 types of boundary disputes that happen between states. The first type is a definitional boundary dispute. So some states have a dispute on the legal language of the agreement. They don't agree what it means, and oftentimes this is when it comes down to things like rivers or other areas of land that are harder to define. Another is locational boundary dispute on the interpretation of the agreement, or if there is no agreement that is interpreted. So if there's no agreement in the first place, then oftentimes the location of where the boundary exists is in dispute between 2 states. Okay, now if you do agree on where the boundary exists, then how it's administrated, like for example with immigration and whether people are allowed free access to cross over the border, that's called an operational boundary dispute. So that's pretty common. Certain different states have different ideas about how people should be able to cross over, and so that turns into an operational boundary dispute. Now, the most common type of boundary dispute is actually called an allocational boundary dispute, and that's a dispute over resources, and the resources that are most often disputed are usually oil and water. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of these types of disputes, and I'm going to describe the dispute and see if you can guess. Okay, so here's country A and country B, and we remember with boundaries that the boundary is not just on the land, but this diagram shows us that the boundary actually extends upward into the airspace and downward underneath the ground. So that includes different types of resources that may be located underground. So for example, if two different states share an underground resource, for example, oil, then there may be a boundary dispute over who's able to access that oil. Now, one thing that some countries do is they drill for oil on their own land, but they drill at an angle. That's called drilling an oblique borehole. Here's an example of what that might look like in order to access a resource that doesn't lie under their boundary but lies under the boundary of their neighbor. The question here would be, what type of boundary dispute are we looking at? So this one is pretty clear that this is a dispute about a resource that exists under the ground, and so this would be what we call an allocational boundary dispute. So here we see another example of a boundary dispute, and we can see the region known as Kashmir, which is located in between Pakistan, China, and India, and borders all 3 states. We can see in the 4 different pictures, the 4 different maps, that each state has its own claims on this region, and many of those claims are overlapping. So there is not an agreement as to the borders. The boundaries are not clear, and all states have a different say as to what those boundaries are, and the maps that each state produces reflect such. So the question here is, what type of boundary dispute is this? If we look back in our notes, we probably have a good idea. See if you can make a guess. It is a locational boundary dispute. This is a locational boundary dispute. So there is not really a standing treaty that gives that all 3 of these states respect. Okay, we're going to talk quickly about the types of boundaries there are. So there's really 2 major types of boundaries that we're going to discuss. And the first type is a type that is created by a physical feature or a feature of the land, and the second is just arbitrarily drawn by humans. So the first type of boundary we can see on the west coast of California here, and that boundary is, we can tell obviously by the shape, that is a physical boundary. So that type of boundary is called a physical political boundary. Now the northern boundary of California, between California and Oregon, we see as a very straight line, and we know that straight lines are not natural. These are not naturally occurring things. So this was arbitrarily drawn through a treaty, and that type of boundary is called a geometric boundary. So California has both political, physical, as well as geometric boundaries. On the eastern boundary of California, between Nevada and California, again, we see one straight line that goes all the way down, and then right at Lake Tahoe, that straight line that heads north-south takes a bit of a turn and starts heading southeast. So we know that boundary, again, is not natural, nothing natural about it. That's a man-made boundary or human-made boundary, and so that's a geometric boundary. The final boundary of California is this boundary between California and Arizona, and we can see how it's not a straight line, very squiggly, and that's actually a river. So that's the Colorado River, and that is the physical political boundary. Okay, we're going to move to the next topic here, which is the shapes of states. So the shapes of states. There are a lot of different states in the world, and there are a few different terms that we use to apply to describe the types of shapes of states. So the first term that we're going to use is compact. So a compact state is roundish or square. It doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously, this state has physical political boundaries, but it's generally speaking a roundish or squarish shape and compact. So an example here is Poland. The next type of state, the next shape is a prorupt or protruded. So here's Thailand, and we can see that this is an example of a prorupt or protruded state. So basically what you have is a compact state plus an extension of the territory. So Thailand, the northern area is sort of the shape of a compact state, but then we can see its southern peninsula is an extension. So that makes this a prorupt or protruded state. The next shape is perforated. A perforated state, an example here is South Africa, is a state that actually has other states within it that surround it. So within South Africa, we see Lesotho and Swaziland are other states that are within it that it surrounds. So it's perforated, kind of like the holes on the side of your notebook are perforated. The next shape is fragmented. Here we see Indonesia, and as we know, Indonesia is actually a state that comprises hundreds of islands. So physical barriers separate the territory for a state, making it a fragmented state. The next shape is elongated. Chile is located in South America, and this is a long, narrow shape. So elongated. So 2 more terms here. An enclave state is a state that is located within and surrounded by another state in its entirety. So an example of that again is in South Africa, the state of Lesotho and the state of Swaziland. Because they are surrounded on all sides by another state, those are what we call enclaves. Another example is not the shape of a state, but it's an important term here, and this is an exclave. An exclave is the part of a state that's separated from the rest and surrounded by foreign territory. So the example that we're seeing here is Alaska. Alaska is an exclave of the United States because it's not physically contiguous with the rest of the United States. It is separated from the rest of the United States, and it's surrounded by the foreign country of Canada. Okay, so those are the basic shapes of states and terms that you need to know. Now you're going to have a quick quiz on this. Okay, so what I want you to do is see if you can, by looking at your notes, and if you made any small drawings, see if you can guess what shape each state is, as well as what tier this state is according to world systems theory. This is a good warm-up for the map quiz that you're going to have on Tuesday. So we're going to start here with Greece. What shape is Greece? Now all the shapes are listed at the bottom. Take a moment, see if you can guess. Fragmented. Okay, so Greece is, again, many, many, many islands. This is really a great example of a fragmented state. And Greece's world systems designation is semi-periphery. Semi-periphery. Okay, the next state we're going to look at is in sub-Saharan Africa, and this is the state of Malawi. Malawi, and we can see it's bordered by Lake Malawi on the eastern border. So the shape of Malawi is elongated. Malawi is an elongated state, and like many of its neighbors, this is a periphery state according to world systems theory. Okay, now we're looking at United Kingdom. So United Kingdom is what type of state? Fragmented. So we can see in the north there are several islands, a few islands in the south as well. And we can also see that Northern Ireland, which is a part of the United Kingdom, is separated from United Kingdom and is not connected to the territory, making this a fragmented state. What is the term for what Northern Ireland is? That's right, it's an exclave. So Northern Ireland, surrounded by the Republic of Ireland, but yet part of the United Kingdom, is an exclave. And of course, the United Kingdom is a core country. All right, next up, we're looking at Namibia, again, sub-Saharan Africa. Namibia, and we can see the shape of Namibia here on the map. That's right, Namibia is prorupted. It's a prorupted state. We can see it's a compact shape, plus it has an extension in the northeast sector. There's an extension that runs, making it prorupted, and is a designated periphery. Okay, moving to South America, this is the state of Uruguay. So Uruguay, bordering Argentina and Brazil. The shape of Uruguay is, it's a compact state. It's a pretty classic compact shape. And like its neighbors in South America, many of its neighbors, semi-periphery. Okay, good job on the quiz. Now the final topic of this lecture, major boundary disputes in the world. Okay, so the first major boundary dispute is located in Kosovo. Kosovo is an autonomous region that is a part of Serbia but functions with its own government. It is not an independent state, however, and the claims on it are from the Republic of Serbia. So Serbia claims it as territory. However, they have their own government and they do have regional autonomy. So they would like to be an independent state, but they are not fully independent at this point. Western Sahara, or West Sahara, is also, again, a place of major boundary dispute. The claims are made by Morocco, as well as the independent government that operates within Western Sahara but does not have international recognition, and that's called the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. The next is Somaliland. So Somaliland is the region of Somalia in the north. You can see here on the map it's labeled Somaliland, and Somaliland has a degree of autonomy, but again, it does not have formal independence. It is claimed as a territory of Somalia itself, but they also claim independence, but they are not internationally recognized. Ukraine, so the entire eastern region of Ukraine is controlled by separatists. The government really doesn't have much claim there, so the separatists really control that region. So that's another disputed border area. Now, of course, we know Syria and Iraq have very porous borders and really do not have regional autonomy. So Syria there are claims by many different groups on territory, as well as Iraq. And of course, the major power in the north of Iraq and Syria are the Kurds, and also ISIS or Daesh or ISIL, whatever you want to call them. Okay, next we have Cyprus. Cyprus is an island located in the Mediterranean, and the island really is split in half with a buffer zone. And the area in the south is controlled by Greeks, and the area in the north is controlled by the Turkish. And again, this is a disputed area. So the claims on this territory are from the Republic of Cyprus and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Tibet is a disputed region, so the claims are from the Central Tibetan Administration versus the People's Republic of China, and the Tibetan government is in exile. They're not allowed into their own territory, and they're, of course, headed by the Dalai Lama. Taiwan is another disputed boundary, so Taiwan is claimed by both the People's Republic of China, or the government of mainland China located in Beijing, as well as the Republic of China, which is located on the island of Taiwan. So the Republic of China operates its government on the island of Taiwan, and they claim sovereignty. However, the People's Republic of China also claims sovereignty over Taiwan, despite the fact that they don't have a presence there. Now, of course, the borders of Palestine are much in dispute, and the claims are made, of course, by the state of Palestine and the state of Israel. And finally, we have Kashmir, and Kashmir is something that we discussed earlier, and the claims are being made by Pakistan, by India. There's areas China claims as well, and there are independent separatist movements within Kashmir that would like to be its own state and not a part of Pakistan nor India. All right, that concludes this lecture. Thanks a lot for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. My name again is Leon Sultan. This is for AP Human Geography. I'm a teacher at Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco, California.